So Jenny, good to be with you. Welcome to the team. Welcome to JWPC. I have to admit, this is a little bit of fanboy dream come true for me. You were a big inspiration to the course of my career. Let's start out with who is Jenny Kassan?
Yeah, that's a big question. I've been a lawyer for almost 30 years, and I've been so lucky to get to practice law in a way that I is very inspiring for me, and I feel really good about it. And that is that I've gotten to work with all kinds of amazing organizations, small businesses, social enterprises to achieve their dreams, oftentimes helping them set up their entities, getting creative about how they're structured, a lot about how they're financed, a lot of stuff related to compliance. So I kind of try to be that lawyer that just enables amazing organizations to do the things that are going to make our world a better place.
What pulled you into this work originally? Go back as far as you wish.
My parents are very kind of progressive people, all about like, let's make the world a better place. So I was kind of raised with those values. And my mom's parents were actually blacklisted during the McCarthy era because they were communists.
We have that in common.
Oh,
My
really?
grandfather
Oh my God.
consulted a famous lawyer in New York over blacklisting as well. He was afraid of losing his job.
Yes, yes. So many cool people have that in their background. So yeah, my mom calls herself a red diaper baby. So yeah, I was just really raised with that belief that social justice is so important and we need to fight for it. And I just have, for as long as I can remember, I've felt very passionate about trying to address the economic inequalities that exist in our world. I don't see any reason for them to exist. There's no lack of sufficient resources and people have so many gifts to share, and yet somehow the way our current system is set up, it's not designed to reward people for sharing their gifts or make sure that everyone is able to thrive, and that just drives me crazy. So I really want to do everything I can to try to address that.
And what brought into focus using business and capital as the vector for social and economic change?
That's such a good question because when I first got out of law school, of course, I went to work for a nonprofit because I thought nonprofits are the ones that are solving the world's problems. But I just realized I was at this nonprofit for 11 years and I just realized nonprofits are so limited. I mean, they can do great things and I still love nonprofits. I still have many nonprofit clients, but I think when you're working outside of that framework, you have so much more flexibility and you don't have to deal with all the regulations and you're not fighting for the crumbs of the philanthropic funding. So after 11 years at a nonprofit, I was pretty ready to move on from that world. And I just think we have a lot more ability to really make a big difference when we're working out of some type of for-profit. And of course, that distinction is somewhat, as like a little bit not real. It's kind of real in law, but in reality, there's so much of a overlap between a for-profit mission-driven business and a nonprofit and entrepreneurially oriented nonprofit. But of course, for legal reasons, we do kind of have to pick, which one is it. So I just find generally it's easier to make a big difference when you're working out of a for-profit.
Now, I promise I don't have your IMDb or Wikipedia page open, but I happen to know you well. So you have a city planning degree. I'm very curious to know both why and what that has added or or influenced about your work.
Yeah, so I am very interested in the power of place. I think a lot of important things happen in places, in geographic places, and that's not always true. I have so many amazing clients that are, totally virtual. Our business is totally virtual. But a lot of great things happen in a geographic place. And so I really love having some knowledge about, what makes a great place? And part of that is, local government policies. And then also at the school I went to, Berkeley, for my master's, there was a possibility to focus on something we call community development. And that I'm really, really interested in community development because it gives you some tools to go into a community that's lower income and has been maybe disinvested from, and to start to work on turning things around and trying to build local wealth and make sure that investment in that community actually benefits the people who live in the community and doesn't displace them.
You're deeply involved in the formation of the Sustainable Economies Law Center. That seems very connected to community development and place building, particularly given the work that our firm does. I'm curious what that experience was like and what was the early vision that you brought to that project that continues on to this day?
Yeah, so I was so lucky. I somehow heard about this lawyer named Janelle Orsi, who I think was about 10 years behind me, having, in the law, her legal career trajectory. And I think I heard about her book, which was called The Sharing Solution. And I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. I want to meet this person. So I reached out to her, we met, we really hit it off, and we both expressed a lot of frustration about how the law often gets in the way of really good things that people want to do, either because what they want to do is illegal or because what they want to do isn't illegal, but it's regulated and therefore requires some legal services to be able to do it right. And most people don't even know when they're doing something illegal or that something that's regulated, and they don't know how to deal with that. So, one of my favorite examples that she talked a lot about back then was a lot of people wanted to go and volunteer on organic farms. And
Mhm.
it was very common that, I'm sure this still happens, people would sign up on this list and say, I want to volunteer on an organic farm because I want to learn how to be an organic farmer. And unfortunately, a lot of times it's illegal because it looks like an employment arrangement and the person has to get paid. And so that was just one example of one of those things where it's just like, how do we resolve this? And there isn't a right answer because we need protections for people to not be exploited as employees. But how do we also find ways to let people do the things they really want to do without having so much legal red tape? So that was really the purpose of Sustainable Economies Law Center. And one of the very first things we did was to write a letter to the Securities and Exchange Commission to request a change in securities law because we were so frustrated how difficult it was for your typical entrepreneur, small business, or maker, or artist. If they wanted to raise money from investors, there was almost no way to do it. If you wanted to just raise money from your community, I mean, there was a way to do it, but it was very complicated and onerous. So we were able to get the law changed at the federal level. So that was one of our first big victories. And then eventually I moved on to do some other stuff, but Janelle kept it going and it's still going really strong today. It's an amazing organization.
And the work that you did with the Securities and Exchange Commission became the Jobs Act, which, as we know, opened up retail Main Street investing through regulation crowdfunding. What, in your view, was that intended to do for social enterprises and community organizations trying to raise capital? And has it lived up to its vision?
Yeah, so like I said, it was legal to do before, but depending on where you were, it could be very, very onerous. Like, for example, in California, you could offer an investment opportunity to the public, and anyone in California could invest, but it could take months and months and months going through a back and forth process with the state securities regulators. So we were trying to create a legal path that would be at the federal level that would preempt state law so that you wouldn't have to do state by state compliance. And so that did happen. The original vision was much simpler than what we ended up with. a lot of people at the very end of passing the statute added on a bunch of stuff that they felt, with very good intentions, with the desire to protect investors, what we call retail investors, which is, regular folks who may not be wealthy or sophisticated when it comes to investing. And so it's not as easy to use as we hoped it would be. There have been some improvements, and we continue to lobby through an organization I'm now president of called Crowdfunding Professional Association, and we're not the only ones. There are lots of people lobbying and advocating to make it more user friendly. One thing that has happened is that it tends to be used a lot more by bigger businesses that maybe already have some funding from angel groups or maybe have already raised one or two rounds of funding from VCs. And, my vision for what it would be used for was more for smaller businesses, for more mom and pop type businesses, because that's really where there's such an urgent need for friendly patient capital. And there are some examples of businesses that meet that description that have raised some money that way, but I'm not seeing it used in the way I was most hoping it would be used broadly. So that's one reason we are trying to make some changes to the law and maybe even kind of almost create two tiers, one for the smaller businesses that aren't on the unicorn path, that will never raise money from VCs because they're just not that type of business. And then, continue to make it friendly for the folks who are on that high growth path.
Now, subsequent to the Jobs Act, you quite literally wrote the book on raising mission aligned capital, raising on your own terms. Why did you write the book, and why is having expert support so important for crowdfunding or any other capital raise?
Yeah, so when I first left the nonprofit that I was at for 11 years in 2006, and I went to start a law firm focused on securities law for mission-driven businesses, like helping them raise money from their communities, I really knew nothing about securities law. And I was lucky enough to partner with another lawyer who had securities law experience. And also, he kind of gave me a lot of time to really understand the law because I think it's pretty confusing. I mean, when I first started to try to wrap my head around it, it took me a while. It really did. And I always think back and I think it took me about 3 years to really feel like I understood securities law. So, I just felt so strongly that we must share that knowledge so that no one has to take another 3 years to learn the stuff. And so many lawyers also don't understand what all the options are. They use a very cookie cutter approach. And it's so important for people who want to raise money from investors to know all their options. And so the purpose of the book was to describe all the different options. It contains 6 different steps that I recommend people take when they're thinking about raising money from investors to create a complete plan. And within those 6 steps, there's so many creative things you can do, so many options. And I just tried really hard to lay that all out as clearly as possible. So that was why I wrote the book. But, I think unfortunately, sometimes just reading the book isn't enough. I hear from people that it's a little overwhelming. So I think just it's when you're raising money for your business from investors, you're creating relationships that are going to last a really long time. And many of us have heard horror stories of what happens when you don't enter into those relationships with a lot of thought and a lot of, preparation for all the different things that could happen. And, I mean, I remember hearing the founder of Adwala speaking about how he lost his baby. I mean, he loved that business. And I don't know, for folks who are older, you may remember Adwala juice, how delicious it was. And then at some point it started tasting terrible because it got bought by Coke
Yeah.
against his wishes, and now it just doesn't even exist anymore. And so it devastated him. And it was all because he took money without really thinking through what the implications might be. And that's so common. I mean, so many entrepreneurs just want money and want it now. And so I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to take, to invest some time up front with a really knowledgeable lawyer who knows all the different things that can happen, all the different options that are available, all the different types of investors that you might not normally think of that could be really good investors for you. Take that time to really think it through before you let any money come in the door, because you might live to really regret it if you don't.
And what help folks understand kind of what that road mapping and thought process looks like when working with somebody like you. What can they get that you really can't get in a book and you can't get from a portal or anything else? I've heard you talk richly about all the different, I mean, specific networks and people and contacts. And there's, not only the people and communities that but there's all the different wrinkles that go into each of the steps of the roadmap. So maybe help kind of shed light on what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I have been helping people raise money for about 20 years. And I've seen a lot of different things. Sadly, I've seen some failures, I've seen some amazing successes, I've seen everything in between. And of course, I've met a lot of not just people who are raising money, but a lot of investors, tons of investors. And I've learned about how diverse investors can be and what some of them are really interested in wanting to see and others couldn't care less. And, so I just, having that, seen so many different things, I think can be really helpful. And then just really taking that the first step in my 6-step process is getting really clear on your goals and values. So that means like really thinking about, in a perfect world, what would it look like? Would you give up any control? Would you be pressured to sell your business to someone that you didn't feel comfortable selling it to? Maybe you'd never want to sell your business. You think about like, hey, I want to do this for the rest of my life, and then I want to leave this to my kids, like all the different things that would be ideal for you. And not that these things have to be set in stone, because I think people evolve over time in terms of what they want for their business, but given what you want now and what you're expecting you'll want in the next few years, we can design it in a way that it's going to let you stay true to that. Because I just feel like, what's the point of even having your own business if you can't run it the way you want to run it, and you know, do the things with it that you want to do, and also not have that pressure to do things that aren't consistent with your values or with your reasonable expectations of returns. So many people try to offer returns to investors that are unrealistic. And it's much better to be realistic from the get-go. I don't think that prevents you from finding investors. I mean, I've had plenty of clients offering what some would consider relatively low quote unquote returns, but because they were doing something so amazing that people loved, that people felt a lot of affinity for, they were still willing to invest. And I've had clients raise millions of dollars with that situation. So it's best to be really realistic and honest about what you want instead of trying to create something that you think investors will want and then making your life miserable or not being able to meet their expectations.
So this is a highly collaborative process, I know. And this is my last question to you, what about the client relationship, the dynamic of that relationship, what excites you the most? What do you enjoy most about working with clients, and what can they expect to get talking to you and, come away feeling?
Yeah, well, I just do love sharing what's possible because I have seen so many things. A lot of people have limiting beliefs about what's possible in terms of raising money. They think they have to be someone they're not. They think they have to create a pitch that it will force them to pretend to be some hotshot bro when that's really not who they are. And I've seen so many different kinds of people raise money successfully, and I always advise them to be themselves. And my clients, that the more they just are authentically themselves, it seems like the more successful they are. So I just love to let people know that that's possible and that it's actually possible to have fun while you're raising money because you can be authentic and you can just focus on the investors that are going to be a good fit for you, are going to get it. You don't have to try to explain things to them and they're like, "What are you talking about?" Because you're only talking to people who are going to get it and be and resonate with it. So it's super fun to open up people's eyes as to what's possible.
Well, I just want to close with some reflections. I have seen you in action and I've enjoyed the clarity of thought, the kind of decisiveness of advice that you give. You take very complex topics and questions with myriad options and really boil it down in practical, simple terms to what's most suitable and realistic. And it comes across as very empowering to know you've done the work and narrowed it down to what you think is best. And that has always come across to me as a true partnership. I think clients really feel like you're synthesizing and digesting all this information and speaking back directly what makes the most sense. And it's been a joy to watch. And I've learned a tremendous amount. At this point, I'll be celebrating my 20 years as a lawyer in December. And I first met you when I was a green, like 3, 4 year in lawyer and thought, surely there's nobody out here doing anything I could imagine being excited about. And you really opened my eyes to what's possible. So thanks for being an inspiration and a role model. And I'm just so excited that you're on the team, you're on our side, and we get to work together. Of the early indications, our clients love working with you, and I will love working with you. Our team does. So this is just a dream come true. So
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be part of the team. I can't imagine a better fit. So I can't wait to see what's ahead, what kind of amazing projects we'll get to work on together.